You're in tune to the search engine. Legacy 90.1. Big shout as always goes out to the one and only DJ Lighter. Dub and jungle, dub and jungle.
When publicly or privately convened,
time should be changed back soon, we hopes.
Love, positivity,
usual time,
preservation,
7 till 9. Moving on for this evening.
Trust in some profit.
Show for tonight. Law at the core.
Give him trust, but your faith must stay with the one who gave the ultimate sacrifice.
And remember, as always, your views and opinions are wanted, needed, and much, much, much appreciated. And you can get involved in a few ways this evening. By text line 07599642626. That's 07599642626. Or you can give us a call in the studio 0161 222 5636. And you also can message us tonight because we are on Facebook on Legacy 90.1 FM, and we are also on YouTube at SEUK Global. That's SEUK Global. So get in touch with us on any of those platforms, and yeah, get your messages in and get involved. It is a Law of the Core, Law at the Core show, and we've got our co-hosts that deal with the show with me tonight, which will be joining me. Liam Simmons, again, has been on quite a few times, and will be here hopefully for a long time in the future. We've also got Daniel Jumo and Daddy Jumo, also a solicitor, Liam's trainee solicitor, and they're going to be joining us. We also hope to be joined by Kyle, all members of the Black Solicitors Network that we've been doing this show with well over a year now. And tonight we're going to be discussing in some general areas with regard to the law and legal issues. And they're going to be initially, 25 years of BSM. I didn't know it had been going for that long. I think maybe Liam and maybe Dan may not have even been here before BSM started, if that is the case, which is quite interesting, isn't it? Then we're also going to talk about regulations of firms. There's been a report that's come out by the Legal Society with regard to how some smaller firms, particularly around the area of law, have been regulated, and whether there's a difference between how some larger firms can operate compared to some of the smaller ones. Also, we want to look at the area of insolvency. It's an area that I think all the guys that we're talking to tonight have touched on in some way or the other. But I think it's an area that Danny's currently working in. You've heard about the big case at the moment of Arcadia, which is a massive organization, but it was linked to more household names that you are aware of, like Debenhams, that have gone down. But it just doesn't happen to large firms, it happens to smaller firms as well. So Dan's going to be touching on some of that. And as I said, as always, you can get involved and ask these guys questions. They're not giving you advice in the sense of their lawyers and they're telling you to go and do something, but they'll give you their point of view from their perspective. So get involved, ask the questions, text line. We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, and you can also call in the studio if you want to ask them questions directly. And hopefully, if we have time after some of these other areas, we also want to look at, the whole legal area of careers. Because sometimes you think about law and I think everybody sometimes goes to the top point of being a lawyer, but there's so many other areas that play the importance in gaining justice for the people who choose to use a lawyer or a lawyer's firm. You might not be somebody who can stand in a courtroom and articulate to a judge or a jury, but you might be the person who is able to get the information, research the background of the case that gives the ammunition to that person who is able to take it into the courtroom and do that. There's also other skills, if You know, there's young people that are involved in cases. You may be somebody who has that ability to link with a young person that helps them to be able to have the confidence to go and represent themselves in court. They're just a couple of examples, just from me. I'm no lawyer, but it is an area that interests me, and my role is the area of children's rights. So I do touch on some of them points, but I don't know. I think my pay compared to a lawyer's pay differs in quite a big way. So I want to know maybe if we can close the gap in some way. So let me say good evening to the guys that are with us right now. So yeah, good evening, Liam. Good evening, Dan.
Hi, thanks for having us again, Anthony.
Listen, it's a pleasure, and I think just on time, as he does, we're joined by Kyle. Greetings, Kyle.
Good evening.
Bang on time. This was like lads in BSM meetings. He just walks in the door just as you're about to start the meeting,
and then does the mic drop. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we just did the introductions, Kyle, and I was just gonna go over to Liam to kind of like start us off with. And I was saying, because how long have you been in BSM, Kyle?
About 5 years now.
You're 5, okay. 25 years. How wow. It's a long time.
Yeah, so yeah, this year we've been celebrating our 25th anniversary. So BSM was back in 1995 by a small group of black solicitors, mainly down in London and Birmingham. The main purpose of BSN at the time was basically to lobby the government against legal aid cuts that were happening at the time, and that we're still seeing happening today. And the fact that such cuts were having a disproportionate impact on those black communities, those solicitors that were from black communities and other ethnic minority communities. And it's really sort of evolved over the 25 years that it's been around. At some point in sort of the early 2000s, it became what was known as a Law Society recognised group. So the Law Society of England and Wales, which is basically the sort of industry body of the legal profession, recognised BSN as being, a group of a certain importance, as authoritative on giving the Law Society some sort of guidance around sort of issues that affected black solicitors and black lawyers throughout the profession. And more recently, we've had sort of a more wide-reaching sort of remit. So we're sort of present both up north in Manchester and also down in London. More recently in the Midlands, which we'll come on to shortly. We also offer sort of membership for both professional lawyers that are qualified and practicing, but also for students who are aspiring to be lawyers. And every year, usually, apart from this year because of COVID, we would host the UK Diversity Legal Awards. So we'd recognise those in the profession that are making outstanding contributions to diversity and inclusion in the profession. And so sort of this year has been a bit of a strange one, really, because of lockdown. We've had to do things sort of very, very differently. In the summer, we launched our sort of Midlands group again. So Kyle and I both head that up at the moment. We've just established a new committee. So watch the space there. We'll be more active in that space going forward. We also had our big conversation event in October for Black History Month. So that was really sort of exploring how all of the commitments that lots of big law firms and big corporates had been making to racial diversity, mostly out of the sort of the killing of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. We all saw that a lot of big organisations were sort of talking a lot about what they were doing about race. And so our conversation in October was very much focused on how those vocal commitments that firms have been making can be translated into solid action that actually has some form of difference. And if you go to our website, you'll see the recording there. It was quite an engaging and insightful discussion.
Give us a couple, give us a couple of the actions that was agreed.
Yeah, it wasn't quite agreed actions, but I think what we all definitely agreed on was that a lot of firms now they are starting to slowly get better with diversity, and they're starting to attract more talent from diverse backgrounds. But what they really need to ensure is that those people that join firms and join companies are given the same opportunities inside the organisation as those from other backgrounds, and making sure that they're included properly in the culture of an organisation, and that they are able to progress and be promoted within it. So yeah, it's very much centered on that. And there was also sort of more senior members of the profession, both barristers and solicitors, and also in-house lawyers at sort of major institutions, and they were all sort of telling us about how it was coming up for them as well. And so it was very much quite a varied discussion, really. But there's lots to do, and hopefully we see in 2021 that more firms are going to be doing more and more to sort of help the cause. We've also got a student offering, so we're soon to be sort of revamping our student offering, which we call Grassroots, and I think Dan's going to be covering a bit on that a bit later. But another focus of ours has been taking us really back to our roots, as I just mentioned, which is looking at small firms, high street firms who are struggling particularly during these times compared to the larger firms, and also in sort of the context of different sorts of regulation. So Kyle, I don't know if now is a good time to turn to you. We recently had our BSN roundtable with small firms, just trying to understand what all of the issues are, what all the COVID issues are, and it's very, a lot of people recognise NHS works as key workers. We've heard that term throughout the year, but also criminal defence lawyers, other types of lawyers who are on the front line are also key workers, and a lot of those lawyers tend to be from Black backgrounds and ethnic minority backgrounds, and every time they're going to work, just as NHS workers are as well, putting themselves at risk of COVID, and obviously COVID having disproportionate impacts on people from these backgrounds. It was quite enlightening to have that conversation.
That's interesting, that one, Liam. Liam, we're just going to go to a break, so we'll pick up that from there, and Kyle can come in and put his point on that. But I think that's a great point to come back to. So just going to go to a break, and we'll be right back.
Feel the vibe.
Okay, so we're going to a break online there. So just to the listeners, but just in what you were saying there, let me just ask you, Liam, since you were talking there, your area of law that you're hoping to practice in when you graduate, is it graduate? What is it? What do they call it?
Yeah, so when you qualify, so I'll be qualifying in 2-3 months time. So when you qualify, you qualify as a solicitor, you get put on the roll of solicitors. So we call it qualification.
Okay, and what area is it that you're going to be practicing? Hoping you're nearly there now, so it's not no hope no more, is it? You need to finish.
Yeah, no, I've just been confirmed actually about a week or two ago, so I'm going to be practicing as a commercial litigator, similar to Dan.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So that's basically suing or defending anyone in court in a business context.
All right. Okay. And have you known from your start that was what the area that you wanted to go to, or did you try different areas, or no?
Yeah, I had a good idea that's what my that's what my interest was. The whole reason I got into law was I had sued my old employer for discrimination, and so that I did that just as I was going into studying law. So that was like my predisposition.
That's a backpack rocket, that, isn't it, to get you going?
Yeah, so I did that, and then on my training contracts, I've done a few different seats. I've done corporate M&A, employment work, construction and engineering work, and also restructuring insolvency. And I'd say insolvency and restructuring is a really interesting area as well, and that's an area that Kyle practices in, and I'm sure we'll hear more from Kyle later when we get to the insolvency section. But yeah, there's lots of really interesting areas that you can get into, but I just think for me, I quite like the general approach, and I quite enjoy the contentious nature of litigation. And I see Dan nodding. I think he must feel the same way.
Yeah, and this is why, in a bit way, especially for those a bit like myself who don't have the knowledge of because obviously you have to be in it sometimes to know it, don't you? And you even find out, I'm sure you've found out much more about the whole legal mechanisms once you got in there. There's some things that probably you didn't even see. It's like when you watch a TV show that's like maybe 5 minutes, something like even that Peppa Pig cartoon, and then at the end of it, you've got all these credits that are going up. That's even longer than the cartoon was, of how many people were involved in the show. There's so many different areas and stuff. So yeah, thank you for that, Liam. We'll be coming right back in a minute. Let's get our listeners back.
Cheers.
Come.
Legacy 90.1.
Yes, and welcome back. You're on tune to the search engine on Legacy 90.1. This is the Law at the Core show, and we are here with Liam, Dan, Kyle, and myself. And we were just talking with Liam, and he's given a bit of a background into the 25 years anniversary of BSM, Black Solicitors Network. Quite a lot that they were doing. You can go on their website and see what they've been up to. And we before we went to the break, we kind of left it on the area of looking at, was it small businesses, grassroots actions?
Yeah, small firms which make up quite a good proportion of our membership.
You mentioned something about tree worker.
Yeah, so a lot of those areas of law, immigration law, criminal law, human rights, prison law, that is all sort of frontline legal work that needs to carry on regardless of lockdown. People's liberties at stake in those situations. So just coming out of our roundtable session that we had about a month ago now, I think, we had a bit of a chat with some of our sort of small firm members just to try and understand what are the key issues that are facing them during lockdown. And one of the themes that came out of there was the fact that they are going out to court, or to prisons, on a daily basis, and that they are, particularly those from a black background, are at a particular vulnerability to what's going on at the moment, not only in a financial sense, but also from a health perspective. Another key theme, which I think I'll turn to Kyle on now, is around regulation as well. There's a lot of movement in terms of how these lawyers are being regulated right now, and there are some concerns when it comes to those from black backgrounds as to whether they're being regulated as fairly as their white counterparts. So maybe Kyle, if you want to give us a bit more colour on that as well.
Yeah, so I think we were just talking before we came on the show about changes that came in last year. Effectively, the way solicitors were previously regulated and the standard of that the SRA or the Solicitor Disciplinary Tribunal had to reach was effectively to a criminal standard. So what that meant is that if you were facing disciplinary, effectively it's a workplace action, they had to find that your conduct had fallen below the standard effectively for a criminal trial, which was beyond reasonable doubt. Some other professions, such as in medicine, theirs is, I believe, civil standard, whereas others, they keep theirs at the criminal standard. Obviously, it was surprising. I suppose we shouldn't be surprised, but our regulator, the SRA, were advocating that should be, the burden of proof should be lowered to the civil standard, which is effectively on the balance of probabilities. But at the time, there was concern raised by BSN and other ethnic minority groups that.
Right, sorry a minute, Kyle. There, just break down for me. SRA. What does that stand for?
So that's the Solicitors Regulation Authority.
Okay.
So they are the, as I guess as the name says on the tin, they regulate all solicitors, and also they effectively, when you are a trainee or you're applying to become a trainee, they can stop you from becoming a solicitor if you have, for example, issues with character suitability,
All right,
which can be things such as unspent convictions. It can be even things such as, I mean, you say even, but it's if you've been found cheating on an exam, that in itself can be considered as an example of dishonesty. And because we are supposedly one of the most trusted professions, the SRA understandably do take really seriously any potential threat to the public and how they perceive solicitors. So of all the things, so a solicitor could get into a scuffle in a pub, various other things, but the one thing that is absolutely frowned upon, understandably, is any form of dishonesty. So that is, I mean, and there's a slight anecdote here where we may have touched on a previous show. Effectively, I think we had a trainee solicitor at the time, and she was in an airport. She was trying on some sunglasses, put them on top of her head, and apparently forgot that she had them on there. She then walked out of the duty free, about to board the plane, and was arrested effectively for shoplifting. Now, what she claimed is she didn't realise she had them on her head, but because she accepted a caution at the time, because presumably she just wanted to get on the flight and make her way onto holiday, that was then referred to the SRA eventually, and the SRA found that again in itself is fundamentally dishonest. The fact she accepted the caution, just panicking and thinking that was, a quick and easy thing to get this whole saga behind her, that was, according to the SRA, was a blemish on her record. So this is something that we talk about when we go into schools, is that you've really got to be thinking, if you want to become a lawyer, that you are a regulated professional. And, issues like this, which you may have long since forgotten about, can cause problems. It's not to say that would prevent somebody from becoming a solicitor. It's just that these are some of the issues that, you do have to consider. So anyway, that's a slight tangent. So coming back to the point regarding solicitors generally, is that when they were proposing to reduce the standard for prosecutions, there was a feeling amongst the black community of lawyers that solicitors generally from our backgrounds do face more disproportionate levels of investigation. The concern then was obviously, well, if the starting point is that we're already facing higher numbers, and they then reduce the threshold of which those investigations take place, that it just makes it all the more easier for black solicitors to be struck off. What effectively in the last week has validated those concerns is our regulators actually produced a report which shows the numbers of investigations into black and Asian solicitors. And what the report shows is that effectively, of all the solicitors, 35% of them who were referred for prosecution were black or Asian. Now, to put that into context, black solicitors and Asian solicitors represent about 18%, and there's about 200,000 solicitors at the minute. But yet we represent almost a third of those that are being prosecuted. So it just comes back to this general feeling that it's the age-old adage that in a variety of sectors and walks of life, once again, you seem to have this disproportionate impact detrimentally on our community. What the SRA have said is that obviously they need to look into what's causing this. They did a similar report, I think, in about 2014, and that was led by Professor Gus John. His report, again, found pretty much the same statistic, and that was 6 years ago, and nothing seems to have changed since then. So I think that it's obviously disappointing, and I think from anecdotally, it's a feeling that many solicitors do have, is this slight unease that it seems that for some transgressions, other solicitors seem to get passed off or not referred to the SDT, which effectively is the tribunal that hears these complaints. One thing I picked up from a previous report is that actually a lot of the complaints are brought by clients. And I think the feeling in one of the author's reports is that because of the nature of the work that black solicitors tend to practice in, as Liam said, is things such as in the criminal justice system, is that if for example, you have a black solicitor or barrister who's representing the client, if the client unfortunately is found guilty, that client then will say, okay, well, it was something that you did. It was a problem with your advice as to why I'm now sitting in prison cell. And there was a feeling perhaps that black defendants were more likely to prosecute black solicitors and barristers, which I thought was a really interesting thing, actually, that actually the cause potentially, or certainly one of the issues, is that it's people from our own communities that are feeling particularly aggrieved. Now, question, is that because they place more trust in a black solicitor? Is it a feeling that they feel especially let down if the case doesn't go their way?
I don't know. I mean, I'm no Columbo, right? But I've watched quite a few of these shows on TV, these kind of like legal kind of like things. And as you said, that kind of thing, there's loads of kind of like mechanisms that's go on. I've heard people, I live in an inner city area. It's very difficult when you come from certain areas and certain communities that you're not touched in some way by criminality, whether that's yourself or your family or whatever like that. So if they started to go after these BAME solicitors and went deeper into the family, then that's another thing. But when you're talking about what you were saying there in relation, oh gosh, what was the last thing that you was talking about there? Sorry.
So it was regards to complaints that are possibly made by our own community. Yeah,
I was going to say, so for instance, I've heard people say that would I understand why they would go against their lawyers if they're going to lose life or something like that. But then sometimes when they then, you get your solicitor, and tell me if I'm wrong, and then they take it so far, and then they've got to pass something on to a barrister. Yeah. And then,
yeah.
Okay, I'm talking about TV style at the moment, so you can come with reality, right? So they pass it on to the barrister, yeah, and then the barrister wants them to say something in court that may even contradict what they were told. This is just a speculative kind of like an area where,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe expectations versus reality. I mean, obviously every case is unique, but I think perhaps if clients have a certain expectation of a solicitor that looks like them, I think they maybe feel a bit more. Probably expectations are higher because they feel that, well, you should really be understanding where I'm coming from. But I think as any advisor will say, sometimes clients don't always like to hear the advice that's being given. And I think maybe they feel that, is that an issue? There are also some stereotypes, which I won't probably go into, but, I think generally that there has been some distrust.
How much does things like, I'm not saying this, you said before that Professor Gus John has already done a report that has more or less said the same thing. But then you're looking at how the years ago when certain levels of legal aid got stopped and stuff like that. Does that have any further impact on not that our solicitors still won't do their best, but the amount that they can actually do for a case now?
In terms of legal aid, yeah, it will do inevitably. I mean, legal aid is a very fixed system in terms of the cost that a solicitor charges or receives. Usually, you will get the beginning process. I mean, I'm not a criminal defence solicitor, but generally speaking, you would get a duty solicitor that would maybe represent you at the police station, and then you may, depending how you feel about their level of assistance, you may seek to then pass that on to a specialist firm that you might be aware of. But I think, unfortunately, the way the system does seem to be going, and it's been like this for many years, is that there's a two-tiered system. Is that those that can afford to pay for, top quality barristers and solicitors that will, absolutely dedicate. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily anything bad on a criminal legal aid firm, but I think that some feel that if you do have a criminal firm which just does legal aid, do they represent you? Now that may be unfair, and I suspect it probably is. But obviously, the more cash you have to throw at a legal team, generally speaking, it follows that you would tend to get somebody that could spend and devote more time to it. I think often the complaints made by legal aid solicitors are they are overworked and they're overpaid.
And I think also that sort of leads into why there might be disproportionate amounts of investigations and enforcement against firms as well. Maybe is it worth just going a bit into the dynamic there in terms of how maybe if a firm is sort of not as profitable by virtue of its size or the fact it's more exposed to legal aid cuts, how that can then have an impact on its ability to comply with certain regulations.
Yeah, I mean, a firm obviously would need to make sure they are compliant with regulations, because that would be a huge issue for the SRA that if they got wind of that. But it follows logic, doesn't it? That the more a firm is overworked and it's running on very, very tight margins, with staff who probably have caseloads of dozens, maybe hundreds of files. Obviously we need to be cautious because we don't want to portray legal aid solicitors as being anything other than, very hardworking and will clearly have a lot of success. But it just naturally follows with any industry, doesn't matter whether it's as a lawyer, whether it's as a car manufacturer. If you're absolutely piled up to the rafters and your production line is probably not running as slick as it should, then people may feel that they've got cause to complain about it. Now, obviously, when a referral is made to the SDT, they have to investigate whether there are any grounds. But this comes back to the concern that was raised last year, is that if you're reducing the standard of which somebody can be investigated, people's livelihoods are at stake here.
Just back up there a bit. When you're talking about the ST what?
SDT.
SDT, and that's
the Solicitors Disciplinary Tribunal.
Right. And then you said about lowering standards.
So when I say lowering a standard, it's effectively when the tribunal considers taking action against the solicitor, it's like you may have a criminal trial, which the standard there is beyond reasonable doubt, versus in a civil. So say, for example, with Liam and Dan, their job as litigators is to try and prove that on the balance of probabilities, either the claimant or the defendants, usually the defendant's behaviour has fallen below a certain standard expected. Now that's a much lower standard, and intentionally lower, because effectively the outcome is usually one of financial. So if you lose a case in a civil matter, usually the worst that happens is you're ordered to pay damages or some form of compensation. Whereas in a criminal trial, because it's deemed that the risk is so much higher, and obviously you've got the loss of liberty for the defendant, the state recognises that, therefore, because effectively the stakes are that much higher, that the burden of proof on the prosecution should be that much higher as well. And this is effectively what translated over into SDT investigations, is that they were having to prove to the criminal standard that a solicitor's conduct had fallen below what was expected. Whereas now the position is, well, on the balance of probabilities, did that solicitor's conduct fall below what was expected? Which may sound like semantics, but in terms of proving a case, one is probably 51% versus one that might be more like 75% likelihood that it happened. So
just to jump in on that, I think a case that was fairly recent that illustrates that point is you might remember the case of John Terry when he was accused of racially abusing Anton Ferdinand. The case first went to the magistrates' court, and because the standard of proof in the magistrates' court is beyond reasonable doubt, they couldn't convict him. But when the Football Association's disciplinary body heard the case, because the burden was lower, just balance of probabilities, in other words, is it more likely than not that he did it, he was convicted by the FA's tribunal. So you can have the same case with exactly the same facts, but depending on the burden of proof, you'll have two different outcomes.
But the SRA's rationale for lowering the standard, so to speak, was that, quite frankly, their success rate, this SDT success rate previously was not as good as some in the public felt it should have been. The cases are usually very expensive to bring. Often they can be quite public. And I think at the time it was felt that there were too many cases that were being lost because the standard was too high to prove that solicitor had fallen below what was expected. So that was largely one of the arguments, was it was effectively to try and restore confidence by the public. Now, how much that actually does, you could argue the other way, that if more solicitors are being struck off, question if to your average Joe, then they might think, well, gosh, there's so many solicitors being struck off now. Then when I was younger, they never heard of any of them. Now they're being struck off, far more regularly than they were. So you can look at that either way, I suppose. But as a practicing solicitor, there's nothing that strikes more fear into you than somebody saying you're being referred to the SRA. And I think, for example, in my sector, my clients and the people on the other side, they're all regulated professionals. So if somebody was to make a threat of a referral to a regulator, they understand how serious that is. Whereas perhaps a criminal defendant client, they may just say, well, flippantly, I'm making a complaint, not really realizing that could end up with that person losing their livelihood. So it's difficult, and clearly it's not a one-dimensional issue. There are lots of factors at play. An interesting one, as mentioned, was that a lot of the complaints do come from clients, which tend to be from our community if you're in criminal defence work.
Wow.
And this is largely speculation, but it wouldn't surprise me if, I guess, part of the problem and part of the reason for that could be, I can see a situation where if you're a criminal, or you're someone who's been accused of a crime, you've been convicted, you might not think your solicitor's done a great job, but if your solicitor happens to be a black solicitor who's employed by a firm that relies on legal aid, and this black solicitor is someone who's overworked, and you sense or perceive that this isn't a solicitor who maybe gets the resource and the respect and the status that he deserves, you're far more likely to attempt to shift the blame to that sort of solicitor than to, the sort of person who you would stereotypically imagine to be a barrister, an Oxbridge educated QC who even the judge is a bit deferential to. And, I can very much see a situation where you would shift the blame to the black solicitor, but maybe not to the white QC, even if the black solicitor might have even done a better job than the white QC, because maybe subconsciously you think you've got a better chance at shifting the blame with one than with the other.
But even if you've got this SRA, yeah, and they go into these firms, even though these complaints have been brought, will they look in these individual complaints? Because if they look into these individual complaints, then they must see something that the solicitor has actually not done in line with the regulations.
Well,
And
Yeah.
so if the solicitor is doing what they're supposed to be doing, then the complaint shouldn't stick, should it not?
well, I think as Kyle said, Kyle gave the example of the inadvertent theft of sunglasses in duty free, and I think one of the
Right. I'm thinking, when I said that, I'm thinking in relation to something specific to in their role as a solicitor.
So one of the criticisms of the way the SDT sometimes handle these cases is, I mean, the emphasis on a red line and zero tolerance of dishonesty. In theory, it makes sense, but it does throw up some anomalies. I mean, another example is there was a trainee solicitor who was on the train with her work laptop, and I believe she left her work laptop on the train by accident, which is a very, very, very serious accident because obviously there's client information, there's confidential information, there's personal data all on that laptop. What she should have done is reported that straight away to her firm, but I think she went in the next day and in a state of panic said she had forgotten her laptop at home because she wanted to give herself a bit more time to, ring the train company and just try and get it back without anyone finding out. Now, obviously, that is dishonest, and by the letter of the law, she has to be struck off. But it's a trainee solicitor. She's panicked. She's made a mistake. She's made that mistake worse by being dishonest. But you have to question, I mean, does that mean that she should never be able to practice as a solicitor again? Whereas, you won't get there are lawyers who have been caught drink driving who will not get struck off for drink driving, and you have to question which is worse. Telling a lie about a laptop and then owning up to it. I think she owned up to it like the next day, and that's her career finished. Or a far more serious offence in the eyes of most people, but one is not dishonesty.
Definitely, good point. Listen, guys, going to go to a break. So we'll be right back.
Feel the vibe on Legacy.
And just staying there with you, Dan, while we've got you there. That's a sad point there, really, when you think about it. I mean, I know in my role we've got to always do the DBS, and there are certain things that if things do happen, that you couldn't practice in that work again. But those things there, that what you've given examples of with the scarf and that situation there with the laptop, that's just crazy ridiculous. But then with you, just similar to like Liam, because you're wearing the crown now, isn't it? You're a solicitor. So what would you saying the area that you're in now, was that your area of interest?
So yeah, I think similar to Liam, I knew from quite early on that I was going to work in disputes, and for the same reasons, really. I think a lot of lawyers don't actually enjoy law so much, having to read rules and apply them to different fact patterns. But that's the element of the job that I actually quite enjoy. If you talk to a corporate lawyer or a banking lawyer, they much prefer, the project management element, the structuring of a deal. Whereas for me, I much prefer, as I say, applying rules to fact patterns and doing that in a, we say contentious scenario. So when you've got someone on the other side doing the same as you, but trying to achieve the opposite outcome for their client. So that's what interested me from quite an early stage.
A battle that.
It's exactly that. Yeah, it's. I think
they're kind of like could be doing with you in this Brexit thing that's going on right now. Did you come?
It's probably not that contentious. Hopefully not that contentious.
And funnily enough, that's more of a deal than it. Yes, it is more contentious.
What is the Brexit thing's more of a deal?
Yeah, it's supposed to be a deal. That's more of a negotiation. Yeah, it's more contentious than a dispute would be.
No, I mean, in theory, it should be two parties with like broadly converging interests trying to work out something mutually beneficial. But I mean, the reality is definitely not that. But you know, I think for me anyway, when you've got someone on the other side, it certainly makes it more interesting for me. I can't imagine anything worse than like drafting a lease. It's never going to be for me. So yeah.
Sorry, you said then drafting a lease.
Yeah, so like a contract for somebody looking to take up a tenancy or any sort of contract really. I mean, although a settlement
He can't even get the words out. He's already fallen asleep.
Okay, right. We're right back.
Feel the vibe.
Legacy 90.1.
Yes. Welcome back, Answering the Search Engine. And this is Laura at the call with Anthony, Daniel, Liam, and Kyle. I'm giving you some information this evening about the 25-year anniversary of BSM. Been talking about the SRA, the Solicitors Regulation Authority, and I think we were talking a bit about that before we left, and we were just talking to Dan, and he was giving us some of his background and why he's in the area of work that he was in. But still, you know, it takes time for me to sink in some things into my head. So just quickly, Dan, clarify that in the sense of the disputes that you deal with, because I just asked you before about the lease. He said writing contracts, and he said somebody on the other side. So who would be on the other side of what you're dealing with, what you deal with?
Yeah, so broadly speaking, in law, you've got what we call contentious work, which is essentially when you've got two sides with opposing interests, essentially like having a dispute with each other. So within contentious work, you might have like a fraud claim where one side is alleging fraud. You might have a debt claim where one side's trying to recover a debt. You might have a negligence claim where one side is claiming that the other side has caused them to suffer loss through negligence. So you have lots of different types of disputes under that contentious category. And then you've got non-contentious, where, I mean, generally speaking, you'll still have two parties, but they're not at loggerheads, so to speak. So you might have a real estate transaction where a landlord wants to get a new tenant in, and the tenant wants to start renting property off that landlord. No, they're two different sides that more often than not will have different sets of solicitors, but you know, there's a common interest there. They will still negotiate over the terms of the lease, but you know, it's not a dispute. So that's okay. The key difference.
So when you're saying about somebody over the other side, that's another solicitor.
Generally speaking, yes, certainly in the work that me, Kyle, and Liam would be involved in, there would be a solicitor on the other side, but it's not necessarily another solicitor. You will have situations where even in disputes, particularly if it's, say, debt recovery, for example, where on the other side you will have the actual person who owes the debt who is not represented by a solicitor. And in a negotiation, in a non-contentious negotiation, you might have a situation where you're negotiating with somebody who, again, is negotiating in their own right and is not represented by a solicitor.
And is there, and this might be a bit of a silly question, is there always some way out, some way to have some gain in the end? Like, let me give you an example. Yeah, you're taking a case against somebody, and this is a case I'm aware of, in the sense that, say it was a house, they did a bad job on the house. The person went to sue them for the job that they did. But sometimes what solicitors do, they won't take a case on if they see that there's a high risk of them losing it. So they may do some due diligence on the other client before they take the case. And then they find that this client doesn't have the money, even if they were to sue them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's certainly in dispute. It's one of the first things you should look at before you sue somebody, whether you think whether if you win, you'll actually be able to recover any money. You know, there's no point in, you might have a fantastic claim, but if the person you're suing has no money, then there's no point in bringing that claim, really. So yeah, I mean, certainly if it's a company you're suing, then the first thing you're going to do is go on the company's house and have a look at the publicly available financial information. You might get an Equifax report, and there are mechanisms within that. So there are strategic things you can do if you don't think that that company has a lot of money, or if you think they've got enough money but you're going to have trouble recovering that money. There are things you can do, such as there are things you can do tactically, but yeah, generally speaking, one of the first things you'll do is you'll want to ensure that they have the money, or there's no point in suing them.
I think I get what you're saying there. It sounded like you had a few jewels there. You wouldn't let them out. That's for the first consultation, eh? Understand?
Yeah, okay for that one, answer it.
Thanks a lot for that one. I hear what you're saying. That's good. So can I just ask all of you then, when you read things like these things of how the SRA are operating, and you're having these discussions with BSM, do you see the solutions and concrete things that they need to do? I mean, is the SRA, in the sense of the people who do the investigation, is there any diversity within that group?
Yeah, so I don't know if Kyle you're on mute, but yeah, we have a very good, as BSM has a very good relationship with the SRA, and the SRA often consult the BSN in terms of regulatory changes that might be made, or other sorts of consultations that they'll have with us and other groups in a similar space. The SRA as an organisation are very aware of these statistics, and they are the ones who are publishing these reports. But as with any sort of systematic process, such as a regulatory body, an organisation as a whole might be aware and trying to improve some things, but it sometimes just takes a bit of time to really trickle through. And so I'm pretty sure the SRA have a dedicated diversity and inclusion team who make sure that not only are the staff at the SRA sufficiently diverse, but also ensure that the way that the SRA operates is in a way that takes into account proper diversity and inclusion. Kyle, I don't know if you want to add a bit more to that.
Yeah, it was obviously just echoing the good and long relationship which we have with them, which is obviously encouraged. The SRA undoubtedly have made quite concerted efforts to certainly try and understand what those systematic issues could be. As Liam's saying, these are changes which do take time to address. I think that efforts that they've made very recently with their solicitors qualifying exam is very much welcome, and will hopefully bring through more people from an ethnic minority background. I think there's the other issue of, if black solicitors are being referred by their clients more than other sectors of solicitors would be, then naturally they will statistically face more prosecution. If you have one group of solicitors which is complained about more frequently, so for example, criminal defence solicitors versus somebody who specialises in tax law, the chances are solicitors in criminal defence will be referred and complained about far more often than a tax lawyer would be. And the demographics, clearly point to there being very few, probably black solicitors that specialise in tax versus quite a high number that will do high street criminal defence work. And I think because of that, and I think this is the pinch of salt that one has to kind of take sometimes, is that you have to stand back and look at things in context rather than just looking at it as a whole and saying these statistics are bad, which they are, nobody's disputing that. But if you try to take a more nuanced and deeper dive into the facts, then there are a whole host of issues. And as you say, Anthony, what the SRA will do is if they feel there is an issue, they have to go and investigate it. And if they do find issues, then of course it will be passed on to the SDT. That's not to say that other firms are, squeaky clean. It's just that if the SRA hasn't had cause to go in and intervene in their firm, then things will be, won't be uncovered as readily as they will be in places that are complained about more often. So it's not easy. I think probably a good thing that the SRA is seeking to do is recruit more people from ethnic minority backgrounds. And I think that that's always welcome because, again, the more experience people have of working with other communities and cultures, the more understanding there is. But so, yeah, there is no one single solution. There's no silver bullet that will save all of this and make it more of a fairer profession to work in. And this is just one form of disproportionate impacts. There are others. It's things like the glass ceiling that black women face in the profession. It's the lack of retention and promotion. There are a whole host of structural issues that need to be addressed. But, and this is something I like to say, is that overall the trend is very much moving in favour of progress and equality.
It's like when you talk about this kind of investigation and the level of these firms that are being pulled to these tribunals, then you kind of look at then how people can say there's a blame for the disparity in the amount of black, Asian people that are ending up in jail.
Yeah. Well, again, that comes often is said is that an offence that a black person may commit will be prosecuted, whereas if a white person commits a similar offence, statistics show that they're not necessarily prosecuted as quickly as they would be. Obviously, you've got higher levels of policing in certain communities, which obviously will naturally increase the instances of engaging with individuals. There's that classic issue of typically black males on the street who might be a bit more vocal in the way they're interacting with each other. It's not necessarily that they're doing anything wrong, but a white officer may interpret that as being, a gang that's causing trouble. Versus if you go out into the suburbs, those same number of lads on the street that are messing around, neighbours and police may just drive past and not bat an eyelid. So there are whole hosts of issues, and it comes back to really the key is having a very diverse community rather than it being in silos. It's about black people being represented in all different areas of law, not just criminal defence or high street practices. It's about being everywhere. So as I say, it's tax lawyers, it's shipping law, it's anything you can think of. The more we get into the professions and establish ourselves in there, and it could be an accountant, it could be as a judge, as a magistrate. These are positions which really we need to be, stepping up and trying to get our place at the table for. And I think until that happens,
like you said earlier, so much is coming down to whether you can pay.
Yeah, it's the age-old problem, isn't it?
And I'm sure there's probably some solicitors that unless you've got a certain amount of money in your pocket, you can't even walk through the door.
Yeah, some firms, they will have a standard rates which people's eyes would probably water at. Other clients wouldn't bat an eyelid, and you go to a firm that will charge a lower rate, and it can be a real injustice for some people. Again, that's a systematic issue of access. It's the same with COVID. It's the black community having less access to good quality services, whether it's education, whether it's medical, just general health. A lot of it does come down to access to money, and knowing options, knowing the right people to speak to, which is one thing that BSN tries to.
Let me ask you this, and it's a bit off Cox really, but what you free, and how long does it take to get to be a solicitor? 7 years, is it?
Yeah, thereabouts.
Yeah.
If
and
you're successful early on.
I know. I've only been through just a little bit of university, but that nearly killed me. So I don't know what I would have done for the 7 years and all that.
We all share that, Anthony.
But I had to have taken on. But would you have? What is it that? Because this sounds like a bit morbid where we've gone here in the sense of, that hill that you're having to climb. It sounds like, So what was it for you that, or when you hear this, that you're able to just keep you going? I know you said you've got this real relationship with the SRI as a Black Solicitors network, but individually as BSN, you've got to motivate people to want to, join and get in and make a difference.
I think it's for all the bad stories. I think undoubtedly life as a lawyer is really quite amazing. Actually, it's for me, it's everything I want it to be. It's the challenge. It's the working with intelligent people. It's trying to solve problems. It's no 2 days are the same. But with that comes challenges. It's very competitive. It's, as you say, can be upwards of 7 years to qualify as a solicitor, sometimes even longer. But I think when you get there, there's a real sense of achievement, and I think you probably feel, as I probably say for Dan, Liam, and myself, is it feels a bit like a calling in a sense. You probably know early on if you want to be a lawyer or be, it's quite academic. You've got to be prepared to obviously put the hours in, but I think the rewards you get from it are, several fold. But I think the challenges along the way are ones, especially as a black lawyer, will be, some people have a particularly hard experience, others will have a lesser of a challenge. And I think the beauty of networks like BSN means that we can come together. Before BSN, the three of us didn't really know each other. And off the back of that, you build hopefully lifelong friendships, and we like-minded people, we share similar interests. And it's good to see, each other progressing. When we started BSN in the North, of a committee of about 12 people, I think one of them was a qualified lawyer. The rest of us were students, just kind of working our way through life and trying to understand this, constant being pushed and pulled from all directions. And fast forward 5 years, the three of us are either qualified or on the cusp of that. And we look around at the committee and think, wow, in just those short years, look at how many of us have actually come through. We are living it. We're doing what we always wanted to do. And I think for me, that is just so encouraging. And I think when I speak with other people, students especially, that, talking about career in the profession, I say, go for it. Yes, you've got to be resilient and got to expect that it isn't going to be a walk in the park that some people might think it is. but ultimately you can get there. And I think that's for me what makes it so exciting, actually. And then obviously once you qualify, you've got, you know, a career ahead of you, hopefully.
What would you say about, because obviously law is part of life, you know, it's everywhere, it's in every thing. In going through your 7 years, yeah, and like I said, time cycles, I think I said something about upgrades before, about how I got there out and I meet other social workers who are the new upgrades of social workers, and they speak of different kind of language to us old time ones. But looking at what you've learned over those years, is it could more be done in the sense of law in schools and in such a way that if they then wanted to take up law, it really gives them a good kind of like start, because it does cover so many areas that relates to life. It's like it could be a beneficial subject on its own. I mean, get rid of PHSE and just teach that through law.
Yeah,
definitely. I think one of the issues in certainly historically in the Black community is we haven't come from professional sectors, so it tends to be more manual jobs. So I think naturally people have had historically different aspirations, whereas I think for certainly our generation, we see ourselves as belonging just as much in as a lawyer, as a doctor, as a barrister, as, you know, anybody else. Why shouldn't we? And I think that one thing that school kids, you know, probably need to have a lot of exposure to is professionals coming in and saying, you know, I've experienced what you've been through. You know, things like, you know, you look at Marcus Rashford. I think just today his mum said at one point we didn't have a loaf of bread in the house. You know, that's a story that, you know, many thousands, probably millions of people around the country can really understand. And there are solicitors out there, undoubtedly, certainly of our generation, that have come from similar backgrounds like that. But it's going in and talking to kids and saying, you can be a lawyer. And it sounds, you know, really cliche, and saying you can be whatever you want to be. And I think it's about, you know, making sure kids do have that aspiration.
Yeah, because the main part for me is speaking for themselves, isn't it? You got the confidence. That's where it starts from. You see these debate things. I think that's a great place to start. You know, and
I think to teach was just, you know, what the actual route is. I think I was still working out how you actually qualify as a solicitor while I was in my first year at university doing law. You know, it's not very clear really in terms of what you taught in mainstream educate. I don't know if that's been an experience that other people have shared as well, but you know, I think educating in terms of how you actually go about getting into those professions is important as well, because there's certain professions where it's quite clear what you need to do in order to get there, but not so clear in other professions. And as Kyle said earlier, you know, there's a small thing of, or it might have been done actually, you know, accepting a caution for some silly mistake at an airport. If that solicitor had even been at university at the time, she could have been held back from being a solicitor for that as well, because they look at your character, you know, all the way back to whenever the incident happened. So actually knowing what's expected of you and being able to plan ahead, I think is important.
And I think as well, it's probably just, again, touching on the point I made earlier about family, and it's the old adage of really, it's who do you know? And, you know, I think, for example, with me, Liam and Dan, you know, if we're fortunate enough to have children, you know, inevitably our children will be raised in a household where at least one of our parents is a lawyer. That will be the norm. And, you know, friends and families, they, you know, see lawyers in the family and doctors and things like that. That's when children start to see themselves in those careers, thinking, well, yeah, of course, that's just natural. Whereas if you go, for example, to South Manchester, a lot of children in private schools, their parents will be predominantly working in the top professions, and their children from day one have this just notion of, well, why wouldn't I be a barrister? It's just the norm, you know. Mum and dad go out to work, or mum and whoever. They come back and they tell me life. What have they done in work today? Well, today I was, you know, in court, or I was doing a deal, multi-million-pound deal. That becomes the norm, and so I think in years to come, that's hopefully where a lot of the black community will be. Is that, as I say, historically, Windrush generation, we came here into more of manual careers, and that then has a multi-generational impact.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point there, and it's a very, very simple one, and I think sometimes a lot of us miss that because we're on our own path kind of thing. Because my eldest daughter had that. I mean, she's just finished university this year. She's gone into doing acting, and I said to her just quite nonchalantly, "Why did you go to university?" And she said to me, "Well, you went to university. Mum went to university. I didn't see myself as, it never entered my mind that I wasn't going to go."
Yeah,
but I didn't look at it like that.
So
yeah,
true.
I think visibility is so important. If somebody doesn't see anyone who they can relate to, who they can look up to in a certain role, then consciously or subconsciously, they're just going to think that's not for them. I think an example I've used before is, you know, if somebody told me I could be an astronaut, I don't really know any astronauts. I don't have the first idea of how to become an astronaut. So it's not really something I could think I could ever achieve. However, if I don't know, my cousin was an astronaut, then, you know, a few conversations and, you know, I could be in the moon, you know. So I think it is important for black lawyers to be visible in the community as much as we can, because I think it can definitely be underestimated just how useful that is.
And I think as well, on a slightly more cruder level, children see material things, and I think that if for our generation who've been going to university, lugging bags around and, you know, getting on the bus, it doesn't seem the most glamorous of lifestyles. I can see why some younger ones would think, not into that. Whereas if they see, you know, the fast money of other areas, they might be more attracted to that lifestyle. But again, it comes down to generations that, you know, if your parents have been solicitors and doctors, you can understand it's worthwhile. It's that delayed gratification that people in the professions will say, well, it's been worth it. Put the 7 years in, you know, it is a struggle, but at the end of the 7 years, life will start to get better and better. Whereas I think often in some communities, that message probably doesn't get through. And it is just seeing, oh, but the guy down the road, you know, he's driving the Mercedes and he's only 20. What's he doing? I want some of that. Whereas a law student might be 25, still on a bus, and people think, I'm not about that life.
Okay, so I'm going to be right back. See you in a bit.
Feel the vibe on Legacy.
This reminder for those.
Yep, and this is where, right. Well, we've got you right here, Kyle. So we're going to stay with you and kind of like go to same question. But we'll start with you. So, seeing as we were on that transition, standing on the shoulders of our parents, is that where you're coming from? Was your parents lawyers?
My dad's actually a heating engineer, and he set his own company up when I was young. Funnily enough, he put on the side of one of the bands Blackburn and Co. Blackburn and Sons. And I said to him, all right, that's interesting. What you want me to come and do what you're doing? At that time, I'd already made my mind up. It wasn't for me. But you know, you just naturally follow. Most kids do follow what parents do because it's all you know. Whereas on my mum's side, they tend to be more on the profession. So I've kind of seen both sides of it.
And was the area that you're working in now your first area of interest, or was it that you were
insolvency
advised in that?
Nobody chooses insolvency to be No, you'd have to be a very strange person to think of insolvency. No, it's one of them. It's quite a Marmite subject. You either love it or you hate it. Quite often people find insolvency quite depressing, actually. Certainly if you do personal work, which is bankruptcy, that can be soul destroying. But no, it was something I kind of fell into and just loved it from day one.
Wow. Sorry, I was just reading this text here, but I'll bring it when we come back online. So I missed that area from the start. You said loved it from day one.
Yeah, it's very Marmite insolvency. I think most people either love it or hate it. Few people are in the middle, but most people don't. It's not for them. I enjoyed it because I think, whereas Dan said he couldn't bear the thought of being a non-contentious lawyer, I originally actually wanted to be a construction lawyer, which is probably Dan's worst nightmare, of looking at a JCT contract.
If you can see someone over it, I wouldn't mind it, but doing the actual drafting, no.
No. Yeah, a JCT contract, you can basically hold a door open with it. It's that thick. Dan would...
How do you look at contracts to catch people in a maze? Yeah,
that is... To be fair, when you get into the heart of drafting, if you've got somebody on the other side who's equally looking at something but from the other side, it's that negotiation. Whereas the beauty with insolvency, from what I do, is it's a mixed bag. So it's contentious and non-contentious, which basically means one day I could be drafting an administration application or dealing with a restructuring issue, or the next day I could be doing something, suing a director, pursuing them for an unpaid director's loan account. It just really does vary. I think some firms like Liam's, they might specialize more in restructuring insolvency, which is advising big companies, on how things like, with thousands of employees, what to do there if they've gone under. So if you're more contentious, you'll find it quite boring, certain aspects of insolvency law.
Okay, well, we're back, everybody. And thank you for being with us. You're listening to the Search Engine. This is the Law at the Core show. We're just talking to Kyle at the moment. We've also got Liam and Daniel with him, who are the co-hosts of this show. I've got a text that's coming here. It's actually a long one. So I'm going to read through it first before I read it to you guys. But I got a question that's coming here as well. So it'd be good to get your viewpoint on this. Let's go. Here it is. It says, it's from somebody called Naomi. I have been in court many times they're even using...
Anthony?
Yeah.
Is it just me that's all sound a bit distorted?
I can hear you very well.
Yeah, I can hear Anthony all right.
Yeah,
how's that? Am I any better?
No, it's all very... How is that?
Oh, okay.
Very strange.
How was it for you?
Better. You're back.
All right, then. Let's go. So I've got this. Yeah, they're talking your language as well, I think, in parts. I have been in court many times as a litigant in person. Yeah? All right. Just making sure you know what I'm talking about.
That's
okay?
Without a solicitor or a barrister representing them.
All right, thank you. A litigant in person with a solicitor on my side and also with a barrister. I saw the different way the judge treated them. Seemed very lawish to me. How is this allowed?
It's
So
sorry, go on.
Yeah, go on, Dan.
Who wants to come with this?
So just very quickly, I think it's not ideal, but it's always going to happen. There are some barristers, particularly the experienced ones, who have been round the block. You know, they've been doing this for 3-4 decades. They know all the judges well, and especially if they have a reputation. The judge has a duty to be very impartial, but naturally, if there's somebody with a presence, with gravitas, and who maybe even has a personal relationship with that judge, there can be certainly the perception that, you know, that person can get an easy ride in courts. And I remember the first ever trial I attended, it was a 5-day trial when I was a trainee solicitor. And our QC said to me, and it's always stuck with me, he said, you know, we've spent about 18 months preparing for this case, hundreds of hours, tens of thousands of pounds. And one of the most important factors is one that we are going to struggle to control. And that is basically, is the judge going to like our witnesses? And it just goes to show you can't take the human factors even out of law. There is always an element where it's quite important to be likable, but that you can use that to your advantage. There's a partner, a black partner in Manchester, who's at one of the top firms, and I remember I was at a panel event that he spoke at, and he was, you know, practicing going around the courts in, I think it would have been like maybe the 90s, when, you know, black lawyers were very, very rare, particularly in Manchester. And he spoke about how he used that to his advantage. He would strike up a relationship with the judges, you know, just by being courteous, by being competent, learning their names. And because he was probably the only black solicitor they dealt with, they all remembered him, and that really helped him in his career. So I don't think you can ever take the human element out of the courtroom. And yeah, you've got to try and at least make sure that the judge doesn't dislike you. I think that's important.
And I'd add as well, like solicitors and barristers, you know, there's a number of duties that are on lawyers, and one of those duties is, you know, acting in the best interests of your client. But another duty is that, you know, you're an officer of the court. Every solicitor, every barrister represents the court, irrespective of whichever client they represent. And so really it's the lawyer's job to assist the court in the case, you know, despite what sort of position their client is taking. Their sort of fundamental objective is to assist the court in reaching the right, the fair, and the just decision. And so obviously there's a level of collegiality there between judges, solicitors, barristers in achieving that objective. And you sometimes see that play out in a sense where, because you can imagine situations where, you know, the duty you might owe to a client to act in their best interest could potentially be in conflict with the duty that you owe to the court, which is, you know, to have integrity, to assist the court, and, you know, to be honest to the court. So a classic example is a criminal barrister whose client might tell them, okay, look, you know, I've committed the crime, but I want to plead not guilty. So I want you to, you know, put in a not guilty plea, and I want you to represent me. At that point, interestingly, a lot of people might think different things. Some people think that the duty to the client overrides everything, and that barrister should have to represent the client on that basis. Whereas most other people think, well, actually, surely if the defendant has admitted committing the crime, then surely that barrister has to tell the court that fact. That where it actually sits is in the middle. That, you know, at that point, the barrister owes two competing duties. You know, one doesn't override the other. The only thing that barrister can do is go to the court and say, look, I have to step back from this matter, and they don't have to give a reason why. And so, you know, there's that whole backdrop that when we're in a courtroom, we don't necessarily see it, and it's not always explained, but there's those dynamics at play in terms of the duties that the lawyers have to sort of uphold. And as Dan says, you know, lawyers, in and out of court every day or very regularly. Some barristers or some solicitors might have actually gone to the same law school as the judge that's going to hear their case. They might have been out for drinks at some point in the past, or for lunch, or maybe they've had some bad history. You never know. But there's that sort of ecosystem there as well. And so really a lot of the times there's criticism because there can be a perception that things might be being done under the sort of underhandedly, but really that's just a subtlety that in most cases, at least I hope, it isn't actually there. It's more of a perception than the actual reality that anything wrong is being done. And so, the person who's observing this and feeling like something wrong might have been done, I don't know, I wasn't there, I can't speak for it, but just trying to understand all of that background might help a little bit in terms of understanding what's going on.
And I think just to add to that, generally speaking, a judge, when you have a litigant in person up against a solicitor or a barrister, the judge will take that into account. The judge is not going to expect a litigant in person to have a forensic knowledge of the civil procedure rules, or to know, to be as eloquent an advocate as a barrister who was called 30 years ago. So that will be taken into account. And as Liam says, I'd like to think that in all cases, but certainly in the vast majority of cases, the merits of the case will be what determines the outcome, not the relationship that the barrister or solicitor has with the judge. I think you're on mute, Anthony.
Can't hear you, Anthony.
How's that?
You're back.
Okay. Yeah. Naomi came back, said I missed a chunk of her message, but that's what I read out is what is there. I have been in court many times as a litigant in person with a solicitor on my side and also with a barrister. I saw the different way the judge treated him. Seems very lawish to me. How is this allowed? That's what I've got there. That's all. So sorry. Right, let me just get through this one here, guys. So it's quite long. So please listen for the questions within what I'm reading out, because I don't know. Right, here we go. From 2167, he said it's great that more people from different backgrounds now become lawyers and other so-called high-class status professions. I studied criminology and sociology and then did the, oh gosh, they're getting with GDIPL. I think it's a diploma maybe. So I did GDIPL. Okay, I got into MMU Law School on my third knock. I'm from Hume and from a mixed African background. However, I did not pursue a legal career for various profound reasons. I did learn a lot while I did my experience with criminal defense firms, which were then about to fund my training contract to run alongside my LMLPC. I feel that for the system to be fair and progress, everyone has to have access so we get the very best ethical lawyers. The whole skate from grassroots has to be wiped clean, the old slate. It's great that so many are now becoming lawyers, but like you said, it's much harder as designed to be. And so do you feel that you are playing the dynamic game to some degree? I think that's the question at the end there. You three have just got your plan in it and you're just on your road.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's you've got to have a bit of a plan. I suspect we could probably all say where we'd like to be in 10 years. Not to say, the path's going to be a straightforward one. But that's what I think actually makes life interesting. I think if everything was just plain sailing, it would probably be a bit turgid, really. But some people, they unfortunately, if they do face setbacks in life, it can, take a huge toll on them. And I think that mental health in the profession is a big issue as well. So yeah,
I think it's worth saying as well. I mean, there's I did my my legal practice course with someone. She had a prior career with the police, and I think she must have been early 30s when she started her training contract. One of the trainees at my old firm had spent about 10 years working as in some form of DIY before embarking on a training contract. So there's so many different routes into the profession. As Kyle says, like, resilience is a massive part of it. You do have to be prepared to fail repeatedly before you succeed. All three of us will have faced various setbacks, but it's never too late. If it's what you want to do, it's never too late to go for it. And B, you've just got to learn from the setbacks, get as much feedback as you can, keep developing yourself, and if it's something you want to do, just, don't give up and never feel that you're too old to go for it.
Yeah. Definitely. And I'm sure, guys, you agree with that, yeah? Now, it's the time. We've got 25 minutes to go. That's not a lot of time to touch on that area of when we were talking about Arcadia and that, although we did touch a bit on insolvency in that way. So can we discuss the other areas of possible careers? And I think we've gone in and out of different roles in the sense of the areas, that you've practiced in and other people practice in. But in the sense of that which is needed for you, I mean, can any of you as one person just do the whole part of the case, or does it when you're talking about a firm, it really does take a community of lawyers or people to make something work?
There's probably no one answer, to be honest, Anthony. I think that solicitors compared with barristers tend to work as a team. Barristers tend to be quite individualistic and will work a case, unless they're really big cases, but most barristers are independent from each other. But you can go from a case literally dealt with by one person through to one that's dealt with by multiple firms, actually, on the same side of a transaction, doing different aspects of it. There is no probably one size fits all. And I think that's, again, the beauty of law, is that whatever your strengths are, you can probably find something that will interest you within the profession. And
so what about people who practice law but don't, for some reason or whatever, can represent in the courtroom? I've seen a situation where there's somebody who has gone through law, they've got a qualification, but they can't go and represent, but they can advise another solicitor who can represent.
Yeah. Well, you've got things like higher rights of audience, which means you can stand up in the senior courts of appeal and things like that. Simply having a law degree doesn't entitle you to have standing in a courtroom unless you are a litigant in person, or sometimes what they call effectively like a Mackenzie friend, which is an unregulated legal advisor. But generally speaking, most solicitors don't go into the profession to stand in court. You would usually instruct a barrister to do that, which is quite a distinct area of law, which is more advocacy. Some solicitors do that, and some really thrive in that circumstance and that environment. But I think there's often this notion that to be a lawyer, you have to be in court. I think certainly in corporate areas of law, very few actually see a courtroom these days.
So are you differentiating there between Crown Court and like a magistrate court?
Or a civil court. So the areas that the three of us specialise in is civil. So Dan and Liam, their cases may go to the High Court to be heard for determination. It just depends. It sounds. What I'm trying to say is it's such a diverse profession that there really is something for everybody. If you would rather be tucked away, working on documents, and if you're a non-contentious lawyer, you probably will never see a courtroom and probably pray to God that that never happens, that you're in court. Dan and Liam might really relish the thought of being in court.
Yeah, it is very and then also, just in terms of what you said at the beginning, Anthony, about all the different community lawyers coming together to achieve a particular goal. I think we've spoken a lot about the sort of courtroom scenario, but also just at the sort of lawyer level in a solicitor's firm. If you're working on a big deal, if there's a big sort of, say, one company buying another company, all of the different legal teams might come together in a very sort of unique way. So you might have what you'd call the corporate mergers and acquisitions team, who would be sort of leading the charge on the transaction. They would be the one sort of coordinating everything. Dan made reference to project management earlier, but then they might also be working with lots of different teams on different areas of the deal. So, for example, they might be getting tax advice from the tax lawyers in the firm. They might also be reaching out to the employment lawyers to deal with all the employees that have to transfer with the business. They might also be reaching out to the competition team if it's a very big deal, and it means that there's a risk that the consumer market might have a lesser extent of competition. I think a good example of that was the Asda and Sainsbury's deal. Have I got that right? I'm trying to remember, actually. Walmart and Sainsbury's, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
That attracted loads of competition issues. You've also got, sometimes they even get litigators involved. I've worked in a litigation team, advised on a deal that had chopped and changed so much they actually needed sort of specialist advice in terms of how certain contracts might be interpreted if someone was to sue on them. And so it can get very, very interesting in terms of all the things that come together. You also might go to finance lawyers because there's a certain amount of loans that have to go into the deal. So that again is like a beast of its own and has nothing to do with the courtroom. Equally, you've got those scenarios that Kyle was just referring to, where it might be a more traditional solicitor, barrister in a courtroom. You also
is there a standard kind of? I know you've got, like I said before, about there certain companies where you probably, you can't even walk through the door for the price level. But is there kind of a standard kind of checklist lawyers rate for certain things, that ballpark? Do you know what I mean? Yeah, like is there an average? Say a theft could be, I don't know, a standard rate, because if there was legal aid before and people got set a certain standard of legal aid that companies were entitled to, was it not?
So
yeah,
there are those rates for legal aid. Yeah,
I think that,
But there's
to give you an idea, Anthony, is that of all the areas of law that you have, criminal defence now is actually one of the fastest declining sectors. Certainly, if you speak with a lot of law students now, certainly in the older year law students, very few actually want to be criminal defence lawyers, and one of the reasons is that the fees are so low, which translates then to lower wages. There are reports of some criminal defence lawyers that earn, just above minimum wage. People look at that and think, well, I'm coming out of uni with a £50,000 of debt. As much as I'd love to defend somebody, I have to be realistic and think I'm going to go into corporate or commercial or banking or litigation. So actually, it's very rare these days to come across a criminal defence solicitor. As a community, that might be the biggest area of law that somebody engages with. But probably, if you look at the statistics, very few of us now. So if you say, for example, a theft, you're almost talking another language to us now. Most jobs that we do will be based on an hourly rate or a fixed fee for a big project. Figures can be astronomical.
But I looked at the other day, because like I said, sometimes I do children's rights, and I help parents with disputes, so children being excluded from school and stuff. And I went on a website, and I'd just dealt with a parent. Actually, I'd gone and I supported them at school and things, and I'd just done it. And then I looked on this website, and it said to read the papers for this particular exclusion meeting, just to read the papers in half an hour consultation on the phone, it's £450, and then £120 an hour if they went and supported the parent at the school. Now, and this was an advocacy service, and they were saying that their service was cheaper than that rate of a solicitor. So I hear what you're saying, but it's like, wow.
Here's one to blow your mind. A commercial barrister who later became a judge and was a Supreme Court judge. He recently retired. When he was a barrister, you have what's called a brief fee. So that is what you pay a barrister to read the papers and turn up for just day one of a trial. And a trial could be anything from a day to a week to 3 months to 6 months. Trials can go on for a long time. So just to read the papers and turn up on day one, what do you think? It's a big figure. What do you think the figure might have been for something like that? For the top commercial barrister.
5 for one day.
One day and reading papers beforehand.
Wow, gosh. Do you know what I'm going to say? 10 grand.
Right. Yeah. No, this is obscene amount of money. I think it was like 3 million. Yeah. Top. That highest paid. That's like the record, I think. But that's the thing, and the thing is, a client was happy to pay that, and then to pay a top-up fee for every day afterwards for trial. So that's kind of why it's not a standard thing. It really depends on, like, first of all, the amount of money that's involved in the dispute, and then also, whether the actual client has the means to actually pay for all the work that has to go into that. Yeah. So it's really, it's a really strange one. And £450 for half an hour. That's I think for all of us as individuals, that's a significant.
You ain't gonna pay that and expect to lose, are you?
No, exactly.
Maybe I'm out of order, but some of that might be greasing money. We'll be right back.
On that bombshell.
Yeah.
But do you know what's interesting, Anthony? Is that you raised the point there.
I'll say that back, guys. Go on. We're still on, but go on.
The point you raised there about, and I know it was a quip, but saying at 450 you expect to win. That's the point, isn't it? Sometimes that if you lose, you're complaining to the SRA.
Yeah.
I paid £500 and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
See how it happens.
Yeah. Because when you're thinking about, I know sometimes you because I don't know if you've got to along the way. I know the last time we had the show, we talked about Daniel's heart. And I don't know if his heart, he spoke quite emotive about his work and why he played a certain role. He cares. And I don't know, sometimes whether you have to along the way get kind of cold in your approach. And
I think you have to remain objective, but I don't think you lose your natural compassion for people.
So do you think when somebody's earning like $3 million for something, they're doing some pro bono stuff within some disadvantaged communities somewhere? Oh.
Well, yeah, I think for law, particularly in England as well, the pro bono is a big piece. Particularly as more cuts are made to legal aid, there is more and more around pro bono as a means to sort of giving back. People who are earning that amount of money and have those skills. Definitely, there's a lot of responsibility to do that. And I think sometimes, that barrister that's getting paid all that money to do that case, the fulfillment level, I can almost probably guarantee you that for that person on an individual level, winning that case, and that winning that case might mean winning hundreds of millions for the client. I'm pretty sure winning that case where it just boils down to money versus winning a case where actually you've acquitted an innocent person from potentially spending a significant amount of time in prison. I'm pretty sure that person would feel much more fulfilled by representing the person that they got acquitted, who was wrongly accused of something. And I think a lot of lawyers engage in pro bono as a means of fulfillment and actually using skills that you have that help you earn a living to actually help out other people who can't have access. I'm not saying that is a fix by any means. It's not. There's still loads of issues with access and loads of issues with legal aid and things like that. But I think it's like Kyle said, you have to be objective, and sometimes that doesn't always mesh exactly with what someone might be feeling about a certain case, but what you feel is always secondary to what you have to do.
Yeah, and I suppose where there's things, there's always two sides of things, isn't there? So I suppose in the light of some of the not having the legal aid and
90.1,
and in a way even the competition, that some people are more willing to not charge a certain rate. I'm not talking about like Fiverr.com, but there might be, but again, it's about knowing where to go, isn't it? It's like knowing that something like BSM exists, and there's certain advice that goes through there, because I think even is it Citizens Advice, what it kind of like stood for and what it did. Nothing like the service that it gave. Welcome back. We are in the last 10 minutes of the show. You are listening to the Search Engine Distiller at the core. We've kind of like gone through quite a lot this evening. I'm here with Liam, Kyle, and Daniel. And just in the last 10 minutes that we've got here, guys, I know we've said about BSM, 25 years. We did try, there were a few guests that we did want to get on this evening, difficult time for all around this year and coming up to this holiday season. Some of the plans and possible guest areas and that for the future?
Yeah, I think we'll be looking at Windrush at some point.
Sorry, before we go there, one more question just flew in there. Great show. Can I ask, have you all had lawyers in your families?
No, I'm the first lawyer.
As am I.
Yeah, I've had the lawyers in mine.
Yeah. So Kyle has, and Liam and Dan are breaking the mold, as it were. So carry on, Kyle, sorry.
Yeah, so I think we'll be looking at Windrush in the early new year, hopefully. There's also a recently launched committee. I think it was set up by Andy Burnham. Was it the race committee? Yeah, that's it.
Panel.
So hopefully we'll have somebody from there coming on.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think, Anthony, I know you're keen for us to have another one of the reparations discussions at some point.
Yeah, and I like the also the. I mean, I know there's a difference, but it's the same because the UK spreaded the law across the world, didn't it? So there's differences, but there's a lot of similarities. And like I think I've said it to you a couple of times, the time when I think it was you, Anthony Brown, and we had the brother on from the States, and he's just got into his own as lawyers, and I found it interesting. Maybe I'm secretly, what did you say you needed to be a bit academic somewhere in the left part of my back brain. But yeah, I found that interesting. And when you say the reparations, what part were you thinking?
Well, that was the topic we were discussing, was effectively, should the state be making payments to descendants of slaves for the injustices that were committed?
Yes.
Which is obviously always a topical one that comes back and forwards every now and again.
Yeah. Well, I think again, that is a massive legal thing, isn't it? Because we're not going to stay there, but there was something I read the other day about even if some legal firms fight this, how much will be paid just in legal fees, and what are you going to do with it? How long? There's so much. It will be something that I think, Dan, that'd be something to get your teeth into drawing them papers up for that kind of dispute.
As long as I'm on the right side, yeah. Well,
good. Okay. Any more? So for coming future, well, in January.
Yeah, I think a bit around sort of human rights law and prison law and things like that. I think there's, we're in a sort of very different environment at the moment, and there are, particularly after Brexit as well, which will be next time we have a show. That I'm sure there'll be lots to talk about that spins off from that. So yeah.
Got another text that's coming. It says insolvency seems to fit with reparations.
In the sense that by a firm having to pay out reparations, it might make them insolvent.
Could it be not? Does that not? The amount that somebody might have to pay? I mean, I suppose some people are saying that most governments are bankrupt as it is already. But is that what you think the person is trying to say?
Well, I think just probably a strand of that, and these are probably one of the arguments that are made against reparations, is that you've got public policy arguments, which says that if the claims are admitted, the cost would be just so staggeringly high that a court would find against a claimant, and which they have done before. I think the most famous one of this is the Hillsborough disaster case. And what happened there was, most law students will probably know this one, is that the court effectively drew a line and said that in order to receive compensation, because the disaster was effectively aired live on TV, millions of people saw it and were naturally distressed. Actually, the court said because the potential number of claimants is so huge that to be eligible for compensation in that claim, you actually had to have witnessed it with your own eyes, as in actually being in the stadium. So for all those people that watched on TV, people suffocating, they were denied compensation, even though at the trial it was shown that they did suffer medical post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think that coming back to this insolvency point is possibly quite a strong argument that will be raised against it is saying you could, in theory, bankrupt the government. You could bankrupt insurers who may have to pay out.
But it worked. It worked the same the other way around, though, didn't it? When it was to pay off the slave monsters for compensation, that only ended in, wasn't it, just 2016?
Gordon Brown, I think, paid it off. Well, finished.
I think it's George Osborne, but I think what it was is there was a government bond taken out back in the 1830s to basically administer that compensation scheme for the slave owners, and then that, you know, a bond is basically, you know, a debt which is raised. It's a bit like crowdfunding. It's raised by lots of different people. All pay into a pot, and then the government obviously used that pot to pay out the slave owners. And then it was the payments made under those bonds, even though the bonds were undated, so there was no fixed time for them to expire or by which you actually had to pay it off. Yeah, I think I read in The Guardian that those bonds were paid off by George Osborne in 2015. With I think I'd paid tax by then, so I think I helped inadvertently pay off some slave owners.
Yeah, so we can walk a similar path with the discussion around reparations. We're not asking for a payment that would be done in a year or 2 years or 50 or 100. You know, we're happy it took 400 or over that or more than that to get to this position. It could take that time to repair. You know, again, it's more the repair than the Asian that needs to be taken into consideration. And you know, but I think obviously it's a discussion that would be good to have. Guys,
just a very quick one, just on the terms of payments. I think people who are claiming the Windrush compensation, I think that payment's just been increased. I think from the minimum was, I think, a few £100. Now the minimum claim to be paid out by the government is £10,000.
Yeah.
So I don't know if people are aware of that, but that's something that, again, we can touch on at another show.
Definitely. Okay then, guys. Yeah, we made it. So we're back next month, yeah?
Sounds good.
Have I gone?
No, can it?
All right. Okay. Yeah. So
all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think February. Is it February next?
Is it? Is it 2 months or whatever? We'll talk about that. We'll
Sorry.
I know you're busy, guys. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. You've been listening to the Search Engine. Law at the Core with Liam, Kyle, and Daniel. And I don't know, any last words? I don't know. You didn't come on with your Christmas jumpers or your Christmas hats or anything, so I don't know what you're doing. So I don't know if you want to wish anybody any Yule tidings or anything.
Yeah, I hope everyone has it.
No office parties for you this year.
Okay, cool.
No, I wish everyone happy holidays and, you know, a good new year, good 2021. You know, however anyone's doing it under these circumstances, but yeah, wishing all the best, and thanks again for having us, Anthony.
Pleasure, man.
Thanks,
pleasure. I'll be a lawyer by the time we finish doing this show. Yeah.
Another one.
Okay then, guys. Never make it. All right. Speak to you soon. Okay, it's Law at the Core show, and that's it from the Search Engine. Until next week. Next week, very interesting show. I'm very much looking forward to it. I haven't got all the details here, but it's going to be a show where I'm going to be speaking with 3 ladies. Two from the UK, 2 actually from Manchester. The other one will be based in Jamaica, and 2 are currently practicing doulas here in the UK. One doula, the other person used to be their family doula back in their home country of Nigeria. And then we're speaking to another lady who's based in Jamaica, who is an ethnogenic doula who uses natural plant medicines to help women in birth. If you don't know what a doula is like a midwife who takes care of mothers' birth, pre-birth, relationships, dealing with after the baby is born, so much that I wasn't aware of in the sense of that role. So yeah, get tuned in. It will be 8 till 10 next week. So yeah, okay. Thank you very much. See ya. Take care.
Should you put your trust in some prophet in life? Give him trust, but your faith must stay with the one who